Good evening, everybody. The Marxist Democrats have just demonstrated their power and their venality in a courtroom in New York City. America, now without any question, belongs to the Marxists. Under pretense of legal process and law, a corrupt prosecutor and judge led 12 Manhattan Marxist jurors to convict a former president of the United States with phony charges and fictional testimony by a porn star and convicted serial liar. The Marxist Dems, the corrupt New York legal system, and the Biden regime demonstrated, no question, their power, and it was impressive, as was their venality. In convicting President Trump of 34 counts, and not a single juror could explain any one of those accounts. Well, we just watched the legal system in this country, folks, die in America. No one, in my opinion, should ever again trust a judge, a prosecutor, or a juror, nor any part of what is now a weaponized deep state that was once our federal government, that clearly means to destroy America and Americans. We are now in the grip of Marxism and barbarism. You and I have watched the Marxists steal consecutive elections, and we didn't do anything about it. We have watched them impeach President Trump not once, but twice, to go after President Trump with 2 special counsel investigations, and then raid his home, steal his documents, and now this. The American people have slumbered while the Marxists persecuted President Trump, and it is now time for you and for me to choose. Will we bend our knees to these Marxists, these barbaric Marxists who now control this beautiful country of ours? Or will we, in point of fact, take it back? We have few details this evening on what has happened in those courtroom proceedings. Diligently in the coming days on President Trump and the deep wounds today on our precious constitutional republic. President Trump has been strong for you and for me, for all of us. And now it's our turn. God save America. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in this country as university administrators do nothing or even coddle and compromise with the culprits. That raises questions not only about the safety of Jews in this country, but also about our national security. America is under siege from within and without. Author and activist Ellie Cohannon wrote about these issues in her book, An America First Approach to U.S. National Security. She is a chapter author, and Ellie is also a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, and we're happy, Ellie, to have you with us this evening. I want to start with the rage of anti-Semitism, and I don't believe the national media is recognizing this to the degree they should, the fury of anti-Semitism across this country. It is outrageous. It is changing the public discussion. And your thoughts about whether or not you could have imagined the level of virulent anti-Semitism that existed in this country and that was exposed during these pro-Hamas riots on college campuses.
Lou, first of all, thank you so much for having me on and for opening up such an important conversation, I would say. Lou, I served under President Trump as deputy envoy to combat anti-Semitism. And since that position was created by an act of Congress, our focus was always on global anti-Semitism because the United States had historically been one of the safest and most welcoming countries to its Jewish community, dating back to the famous letter of President George Washington to the Jews of the United States. And so, Lou, to your question, it is actually shocking to see what has taken place across our country. We've seen a 400% rise in anti-Semitic incidents and attacks since the October 7 massacre, which took place in Israel. And what we found out since then, Lou, is a lot of great reporting, which has documented that certainly the campus protest movement has not been any kind of a spontaneous or organic movement, but well funded by both foreign sources and sources like the Rockefeller Foundation, George Soros, and others that we've seen in the past fund very destabilizing activities like the BLM riots and other riots in the past in this country, which I would say really pose a threat to our national security.
No, I think absolutely. And the issue for me is, even though we know that the Chinese, the CCP, is behind many of the groups that are pro-Hamas, who've been demonstrating actively, viciously across college campuses, what bothers me has been the response of those universities, those colleges, their leadership, their chancellors and presidents, and their corporate boards and trustees. Weak need and absolutely not standing up for Jewish students in their own community and in their own institution. And as well, giving in to the Hamas activists on the issue of the U.S. alliance with Israel. It's, to me, deeply disturbing. And that's what I worry most about.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's horrifying to think that there's perhaps an entire generation in the United States educated at our most elite universities that could be graduating with degrees and walking out of campus with really hate-filled notions that are also really anti-American. And so, Lou, as you mentioned, we saw Republican members, people like Virginia Fox, call these university presidents to Congress and have them testify. And their testimony was such utter moral failure. What's also shocking, I think, for us to see, I can say at Columbia University, which is my own alma mater, not only did we see the encampments run by students, but then there was a day when the faculty came out, and shockingly enough, on that day, there were thousands more people across Columbia's campus, Lou. And, that's when it hit me really hard that this is not a matter of just students. It's about the faculty, it's about the administration, it's about the DEI centers and administrators that the universities have hired to the tunes of millions of dollars across the country. And so, what we're seeing, I think, is a real moral rot in our universities. And I think it's going to require a real gutting out of the universities to bring them back to what they once were, which was institutions which were the pride of our country, and really something that we were proud of to show the world our academic institutions. It's kind of horrific to think that in 2024 our institutions of higher learning have just become just institutions of complete rot.
Rather than institutions of higher education, too many look like they are nothing more than cesspools of indoctrination, and they are living in a bizarre and remote world in which DEI has overtaken meritocracy, meritorious achievement in academia, and instead replacing it with plagiarism and giving it simply a pass, as did Harvard with Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard. And they almost had to bring in bulldozers to push the trustees, the governing board, and the leadership of Harvard toward doing the right thing, which was removing her. They were going to put up with a plagiarist, a bigot, and a liar, in point of fact. And by the way, not the only instance of that in academia, unfortunately, over this year. Your reaction to how intractable they've been, these folks who decide if they're pro-Palestinian, they can do whatever they want, plagiarize, they can line up with Marxists, they could push DEI and change the subject. Your thoughts?
Lou, part of the issue with DEI. I think all Americans can support the notion of diversity, having representation. The issue with DEI is that it is this kind of propagandist theology, practically, where
Yeah.
there's a notion of dividing the world between the oppressor and the oppressed. And I would argue this is a very anti-American ideology. I am an immigrant to the United States. I came here, Lou, when I was 6 years old. I was running away with my family from the Islamic Revolution in Iran. We were Jewish, and we were facing rising anti-Semitism. And we came here as legal immigrants and got refugee status. So, look, I understand very well the importance of diversity. At the same time, to divide the world into oppressed and oppressor, it's overly simplistic. I don't think it's an accurate reflection of America and the greatness of this country, the opportunity that America has afforded to generation after generation of immigrants and others in this country. And so it's really a hateful ideology at the end of the day. It stands against our
It's,
American core values, and I think that we're well past the point where we have to reject it.
yeah, I think this country right now is awakening and is well past the point where there is any doubt that diversity, equity, inclusion, CRT, the usual claptrap from the Marxists, is in any way persuasive now. We're starting to see it ebb slowly, but ebb and recede in corporate America, in HR departments across the country. And we've got to see far more because the entire federal government is still committed to this claptrap, as I call it, that emanates from the Marxists and is directed at everything that is American with the intent to destroy equal opportunity, to destroy equal rights, and absolutely destroy this country. And the American family is in the crosshairs right now. Cultural Marxism is overwhelming us, isn't it?
Exactly right. And I think, for most Americans, it's hard for us to understand exactly what's going on in the country. And I think most of us are, again, we're kind of shocked. We're observing what's happening on the campuses. We're observing what's happening in our streets, these really violent protests. And Lou, I'm convinced that most Americans we want our country back. We want to have stability. I can't help but also notice the timing of these kinds of really destabilizing street protest activities. It seems like the timing is always in the lead up to national presidential elections. We had BLM in the lead up to the 2020 presidential elections. Now we see this pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas movement in the lead up to the 2024 presidential elections. And so, it also behooves our authorities to really get a hold on this situation and make sure that this isn't some sort of organized activity meant to create chaos and really get in the way of our ability to have fair and free elections in this country.
Without question. And it also gets in the way of foreign policy and the U.S. national interest. When we have a president, as we do in Joe Biden, who is talking about a two-state solution within days of the October 7th massacre, we're dealing with a level, in my judgment, of anti-Americanism and anti-Israeli hatred that is not to be tolerated in any U.S. government, particularly in its White House and the national security apparatus, the National Security Council, and it spills over, obviously, to the State Department as well, where there seems to be a serious effort to affirm that kind of ignorance on the part of the administration and U.S. policy. I hope that Benjamin Netanyahu will not give an inch to these fools who are running U.S. foreign policy right now. Ellie, we enjoyed talking with you. Thank you for being here, and come back soon if you would, please. In other news, Georgia Democrats voted to oppose the state's citizenship verification system. The only reason anyone would try to dismantle that system as if they wanted non-citizens to vote. And according to the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, that is exactly what the Marxist Dems just proved. New York has become the center of political gravity with the Trump trials. All eyes are on the city now, awaiting a verdict that could change the course of history. Our next guest is on the ground in New York covering that trial. He's also a reporter for the Gateway Pundit and a board member of the New York Young Republicans Club. We're joined by Paul Ingrassia. Again, the second day of deliberations. Paul, great to have you with us on the show. Give us your sense of all that's going on there.
Well, it's been a very hectic week. It's been a very hectic trial, Lou. But, we're on day 2 now of deliberations. The jury formally began deliberations yesterday around noon, a little before noon. So now that we're on day 2, we're late afternoon, so I don't foresee a verdict happening today. I've talked to a lot of lawyers, a lot of legal professionals, some people involved in President Trump's team. We're not expecting a verdict today, potentially tomorrow, but this process is going longer than anticipated. And I think the longer that this goes on, the more they scrutinize the law, the more they deliberate and speak among themselves, the greater the likelihood that President Trump has a positive outcome in this case. And that's sort of the wisdom that's sort of the conventional wisdom that we're hearing outside the courthouse today.
Well, let's hope that conventional wisdom holds. And it's an interesting assessment in terms of the length of the deliberation. There's also this view that Judge Merchant was one-sided as he could possibly be, basically trying to box in the jury to deliver a guilty verdict on as many of these counts as possible. There's also a view, as you know, that perhaps it got so confusing for those jurors that the judge himself may be responsible for that confusion, leading to a hung jury, perhaps even an acquittal. You're thinking?
I think all of that is true. I think this is sort of a legal matrix of a theory of criminal liability that Mershon and Alvin Bragg and ultimately Joe Biden have put forward here with this case. I mean, there are 3 prongs involved. They're trying to elevate basically what otherwise would be a misdemeanor. The statute of limitations expired on this business records falsification scheme that they're alleging President Trump committed. And because that statute of limitations is expired, they're trying to find a predicate crime, a second crime to combine with that other crime in order to elevate it into a felony where they could prosecute President Trump and circumvent that statute of limitations rule. But so far, the entire legal theory, as they've tried to spell it out, as Mershon has tried to spell it out, has been very convoluted. Obviously, the burden of proof is very high. It's beyond a reasonable doubt, and they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the people do. The burden of proof is on the prosecution for every single element of all the crimes alleged. Now, something very egregious is happening. This is a due process violation because Judge Mershon said, I understand that we're basically shooting for a Hail Mary here. This case has been kicked down the road for 7 years now. So I'm going to change the rules a bit, and this is unheard of before, where basically if you agree that one of 3 crimes have been committed, so if I'm a member of the jury, and I think, and Judge Mershon basically laid out 3 options. You could think that there's a federal election law violation, or a tax law violation, or a record-keeping violation, and you only have to find that he's guilty on one of those 3 crimes, and I'll leave it up to you. This is what the judge is saying. I'll leave it up to you, the jury, to decide which crime he's guilty of, and you could mix and match it. It doesn't matter, and that way we can sort of fast-track a guilty verdict. So that just shows how corrupted and conflicted this trial has been, and honestly, from start to finish, this is an illegitimate show trial, and I think and I hope that at least 1 or 2 jurors, even in a city as liberal as Manhattan is, drawing from a jury pool of, people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 by 90%, upwards of 90%, you're hoping that at least one will rule in favor of President Trump.
So you got a DA who is George Soros sponsored, a Marxist himself, Alvin Bragg. You've got a judge, Juan Merchant, who is he's a Biden donator and
Yes.
contributor, and his family makes a living off of raising money for the Marxist Dem candidates all across the country, principally at the federal level. I mean, on its face, this is as ugly a case as it could be for recusal, and no one is having any of it. And legal experts in New York are saying absolutely nothing. No one is raising their hand to say this is madness in the New York court system.
That's true. And I wish more Republicans in the New York State Republican congressional delegation would speak up. You have a few. You had Congresswoman Stefanik file an ethics complaint. But other than that, I've seen nothing. Once this is all said and done, there's going to have to be massive investigations into the New York criminal justice system. That includes the New York bar and really all the rest. The entire system from top bottom needs to be completely overhauled, given just how egregious the ethics violations have been in this case. And not to mention, you referenced, Lou, that Judge Merchan's own daughter is the president of a consulting firm that has Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, as well as Adam Schiff and many other far-left progressive Democrats as their clients. They profit off this, and she's profited off of it and made millions and millions of dollars off those client connections. That's a direct familial conflict of interest, and on those grounds alone, this case should be tossed. Not to mention the fact, and this gets lost on a lot of people, the prosecutor in this case, one of them, Matthew Colangelo, previously served as the number 3 official at the Department of Justice. He stepped down from that DOJ post to work in a state DA office. Now, for your listeners, they might not understand just how ridiculous that is. That's like going from the New York Yankees to the Long Island Ducks. It just doesn't happen. You would not downgrade yourself in that prestigious a position unless there was an inference, either directly or there's an understanding, likely more than that Joe Biden directed him, that Merrick Garland directed him to pressure Alvin Bragg to take up this case and prosecute his political opponent, who's leading in every single poll right now.
We've seen up and down the eastern seaboard, a lot of prosecutors show up at the White House to show up with Attorney General Merrick Garland, presumably to be tutored and to take their marching orders, including the lead prosecutor for Fannie Willis, including Colangelo. They decided to send him to the scene of the crime. Has he been in any way effective in that role?
I don't think so, but they had this one prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, basically lead the summations on now Monday or Tuesday. I'm losing track of time, but when they had their summations, he went on far longer than Donald Trump's defense attorney, Todd Blanche, did. This guy was rambling for 5-6 hours. And I talked to people here at this courthouse who have worked here for decades, and they said that was the longest summation that we've ever seen. The guy was rambling about nonsense. At one point, he brought in Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. And when he did that, I'm like, that's it. They don't have a case here. When you start talking about Monica Lewinsky, when you start talking about things that have totally no bearing on anything whatsoever, there is no case. And I think, the fact his voice is very effeminate, weak, he sounds like a liberal guy, very annoying, actually, Lou. And I think that, no matter how dyed-in-the-wool liberal any of these jurors might be, that has to be grating on you. That has to be annoying. Just making you sit in the courthouse till 8 o'clock. This is an icebox. It's not comfortable to be in that courthouse. So I think their strategy that they've pursued, I think will backfire ultimately on them.
Well, speaking of the jury and their likely irritation with that kind of burden on them by the prosecution, do you think do you see any sign that this jury has an open mind or two sitting among the 12?
Well, originally they put out, a questionnaire to determine where a lot of the jurors got their news. Unfortunately, a lot of them still read the New York Times, get their news from CNN. There was one, however, that follows Trump on Truth Social, and that uses Truth Social as a social media website. So,
Good.
I mean, Gavin Newsom is also on Truth Social, so you could take that with a grain of salt, but it could be indicative of his political views. There was, however, one observed over the past couple of days that during the summation process of the argument that I was just describing by prosecutor Joshua Steinglass, the guy basically put his hands on his face like that. He looked very frustrated. He looked very aggravated and annoyed with how the prosecution was, going about their closing argument. So I think that was a good sign. And today he was also cited staring intently at Donald Trump, not in a bad way, not like with a scowl on his face, but very serious. And from what I've talked to and from what I've seen, in a respectful sort of way. So I think there may be one or two, at least, hopefully, for a hung jury based on these observations.
Well, Paul, we appreciate your reporting, and I have to say, the Washington Post had a very simple column the other day about the Trump team treating the jury as if they were idiots. If anybody's treating this jury as idiots, it is the prosecution, because this thing is put together with baling wire, spit, and a little bubble gum. I mean, it's a disgusting thing, and this is taking up parts of their lives, not just their work days, but it is a real burden for them. I would think there's at least enough IQ and integrity somewhere on that jury to say this is nonsense and it's nuts. I hope so. Paul, I've just got to say thank you so much for your terrific reporting and your analysis, and we thank you very much. Well, turning now to other stories making headlines, co-hosts on ABC's The View, well, they panicked and they scrambled to downplay what attorney and author John Grisham said about fantasizing and then killing U.S. Supreme Court justices. Watch the Marxist left go mad.
There's some scandals plaguing the Supreme Court. Do you have any thoughts on that? And maybe write a book or make a movie out of that?
I wrote a great book called The Pelican Brief.
Yes! Whoa, you sure did.
In which 2 Supreme Court justices were assassinated.
I know.
Yes.
And I thought about doing it again. And
No.
Writing part 2. He's talking about writing part 2.
it's all fiction.
It's all fiction.
It's all fiction.
It's all fiction.
John Grisham, he's got some explaining to do. And The View isn't the perfect place to do your explaining. He doesn't have the spine to say it, but it's clear that Grisham has deep and dark thoughts about Supreme Court justices. And my guess is that those deep and dark thoughts don't extend to the left-wing justices. More bad news for Biden. Scranton Joe can't turn out a crowd even in Pennsylvania, not to even save his very life. Images from Biden's Keystone State rally Wednesday, and there they are, my goodness, show that he struggled to fill a little high school, I think it was a high school gym. Compare that to whatever, the gym's way too big for his crowd. Compare that to President Trump's recent rally in New Jersey, where tens of thousands of New Yorkers from South Bronx showed up. Phony Joe could never. Well, in other news, as you know, Mike Lindell has a passion to help us all get the best sleep of our lives. After he invented the world's best pillow, Mike created the famous Giza Dream Sheets. They are the best sheets you will ever sleep on. I will say that and say that because it is true. My wife and I have been sleeping on those sheets and getting great night's sleep for years and years now, and you can too. For just a limited time, you will get a queen size set of those sheets for $59.98. And for a limited time, these lowest prices in history will be available to you with a bonus. Mike and MyPillow employees continue to be canceled by those big box stores and attacked by the left-wing nasty media. They appreciate all of your great support for them during these times and want to thank you by giving you free shipping on your entire order today. To get the best specials ever, go to mypillow.com, call 800-977-9152, and use, please, promo code Dobbs, Dobbs. You get the famous Giza Dream Sheets, queen size for $59.98, king size for $10 more. So call 800-977-9152 or go to mypillow.com, promo code Dobbs, and please join me for my podcast, The Great America Show Daily. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio is demanding Attorney General Merrick Garland open an investigation into the corruption of Judge Juan Merchan. Vance says Judge Merchan is persecuting Donald Trump. He's infringing on Trump's First Amendment rights. That's all true. It is also true that the Biden regime will never, ever investigate its own corrupt practices and politics. And joining us tonight is former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGeneva. Joe has steadfastly defended President Trump from the weaponization of the legal system and the deep state, and yes, the Marxist Dems and the Biden regime. Joe, great to have you with us. And I want to start with this trial, day 2 and deliberations. And I almost got the sense today that there were really deliberations, that it's not an open and shut railroading of President Trump by the Marxist Dems, including this jury.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the jury appears to be doing its job and reviewing the evidence and going through it methodically, which is exactly what they are supposed to do. I think, however, that in many ways it's a fool's errand, because the instructions they were given by Judge Merchan were basically a directed verdict of guilty. He took every advantage for the government, and he disadvantaged the defendant at every turn, refused to give instructions that would be helpful to the defendant, refused to allow evidence that would be helpful to the defendant. I don't think there's any doubt that the judge decided from the beginning that he was going to try and convict Donald Trump, and that he didn't care if it was overturned on appeal, because he just wanted to have Trump convicted before the election and have him harmed during that period, and certainly to have him out of campaigning during that period.
You know, I want to go through much of what's happening to the trial with you, because no one knows better what the prosecution is thinking as well as the defense. I also want to ask you, at this point, is there anything in particular you're looking for in this period of deliberation where the jury is apart from the rest of the world, if you will? Is there anything you're looking for in their requests for instructions or clarifications or to go back over testimony? Is there anything you're looking for in particular that would give us any reason to hope that, as you suggest, it looks like it's a cut and dried deal, but anything that would indicate that perhaps there's a little bit of a tear in the universe on that issue?
Well, I think it's certainly interesting that they requested to have testimony of 2 of the key witnesses read back. I think it was very important that they asked for the jury instructions to be read to them again. That merely underscores why it's important for the jury to have an actual copy of the instructions in the jury room. The judge refuses to give it to them. That is one of the dumbest things that you can do as a judge, is not give the jurors the instructions. The instructions in this case were very complicated. Even though they were designed to hurt Donald Trump, they were nonetheless complicated. Juries need to look at them to be able to go through them. You can't do that when they're read to you a few times and you take notes. That was designed, by the way, by the judge not to give them copies of the instructions, to force them to reach the wrong types of conclusions. I must say, it's hard for me to imagine that the New York State Supreme Court could have allowed this judge to sit in 3 Trump cases, as well as supervise the special grand jury that looked into this matter. If anybody thinks that the fix isn't in this case, they're really they're living in a dream world. But everything I've seen from the jury thus far is perfectly normal activity in a case like this. My own guess is they're going to find him guilty, because that's exactly what the judge has designed these instructions to accomplish.
You know, when I look at it just mathematically, 34 charges, the idea that you don't get convicted of one, I mean, that's a huge huge odds advantage to the judge, and to get all the way through 34 without being convicted, it seems almost very near impossible.
Well, I think that's exactly one of the calculations that was made by Bragg in charging these 34 nonsensical so-called false business records entries. This is not a real criminal case, Lou. This is a phony criminal case. This was a case designed to hurt Trump, to smear him, to tie him up in court, and if they were lucky enough to get a conviction, so they could call him a felon between now and the election. But what is really sort of, for me as a lawyer watching this, is to see the degradation of the judiciary in front of the American people, to watch a real hack do what he could do to ruin a case of this magnitude, a case that never should have been brought, by the way. Obviously, that's obvious to anyone who's a good lawyer. So, it's just it's a tragedy. It is an American tragedy. It's Shakespearean in one sense, and it's something that Charles Dickens would have done a marvelous job writing about.
Well, I have to say that I am so infuriated. It's very hard for me to even cover it, because
Sure.
the absurdity, the ignorance, the corruption is palpable in every whatever your perspective. The ignorance is beyond belief, even by Biden regime standards, even by the Marxist Dim standards, even by the New York Marxist Dim standard. This is low life stuff. And we haven't had a single jurist, a single leading legal mind or attorney or judge or justice in this New York system stand up and say, this is stupid, it's wrong, and it's evil. And we will not be a part of it. And shut it down, Merchant, because you are a creep of the highest order, corrupt to your eyeballs. Why isn't that happening somewhere from some quarter, Joe?
Well, because the bar and bench of New York are totally corrupt. I must say, I used to have great respect for the bar of New York City and the state of New York, but not anymore. It's pretty clear that after a number of years of Democratic governors, the bench in New York City and the state of New York has become completely populated by Democratic hacks. And when you marry that with a corrupt district attorney, a politically corrupt district attorney like Alvin Bragg, this is what you get. You get this horrible, horrible display of prejudicial administration of justice. Nothing good will come from this. And shame on the people of New York, shame on the city of New York, the state of New York. And by the way, the bar of New York especially, I noticed that the president of the New York State Bar, a fellow named Richard Lewis, who is a domestic relations lawyer, went out of his way to criticize Donald Trump for criticizing the case and the judge. Nary a word about the outrageous prosecution itself. So what's going to happen when this is over? Nothing. Judge Merchan will continue to draw a salary for his incompetent and biased work. The members of the bar in New York will sit silent because they all hate Trump. And New York will be embarrassed around the world. And I pray that smart business people who are doing business there decide to leave, because you can't trust a judiciary and a court system like the one that's showing itself off in this trial.
As President Trump said, every business that puts up with this now, they have no excuse. They've seen what it is and what they're risking. I don't know how any business could tolerate this. And that's the other part of it. The business community is just silent as they can be, sitting on their hands and counting their money, just like everyone else, it seems, in New York does, at least in Manhattan. So let's go to what is to follow. And that is a president who is in the midst of his campaign. He's running strongly in all of the national polls, all of the battleground states, as you know. He looks indomitable right now. And this, I don't believe, will influence his voters, his followers at all, because he is the disruptor. And the people who are begging this president to return to the White House know that this corruption is not just in New York. It's overflowing in D.C. And it is nationwide. Your thoughts about what happens from here?
Well, I agree with you. Certainly, Trump's base is only going to be more solid. They're only going to be more supportive of him. So far, the polling shows that people are beginning to realize that this is a corrupt prosecution, that it is not a just prosecution, and that a lot of people believe increasingly that Joe Biden is responsible for it. And they will be encouraged in that belief as a result of the stupid press conference held by the Biden campaign outside the courthouse yesterday in one of the most egregious blunders I've ever seen by a political organization. But they're scared because they're very frightened. They, the Biden campaign, are frightened of the polling and shows that Trump is getting stronger as a result of each volt that they put into his body through this corrupt criminal process. So I hope that the polls continue to show the Americans are disgusted by what is transpiring in New York, and that Donald Trump is the beneficiary of that. And by the way, Donald Trump has to win. This is the most important election in so many elections I can't remember, because another 4 years of Joe Biden or whoever succeeds him, if he doesn't finish office, is unacceptable. He is destroying the economy, our foreign policy, our military, our border, you name it. Everything that Joe Biden touches turns to garbage. I was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware. I've known Joe Biden since we were teenagers together in Delaware. He's never been anything more than a ward healer politician. And look where he's gotten on no talent, no brains, and no guts.
Yeah, but a pretty good nose for opportunity. I would say that for him at least. He has found a lot of like-minded people in the so-called Democrat Party over the years. I think right now he's out of them now. You've got 54% in the latest polls of Democrats saying they want to get this guy off the ticket come hell or high water. Joe, thanks so much for being with us. Great to see you. Come back soon. Turning now to some good news, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has approved legislation that will stop minors from undergoing the butchery of so-called gender-affirming care. Tennessee is also now the first state to penalize adults who enable minors to get those treatments without parental consent. This is a win for sanity in America. The city of Tukwila in Washington state is begging for help after Seattle flooded their neighboring town with illegal aliens. Tukwila has become a dumping ground for Seattle's illegal alien overflow. And have they got an overflow? Seattle police officers have sent them to the town of about 21,000, sent them there in droves, and the situation is now so bad, some churches have been converted into shelters for illegal aliens. But Seattle officials won't lift a finger to help fix the mess that they have dropped into Tukwila's lap. And that raises the question, why in the hell doesn't Tukwila do something like dump them right back in Seattle? About 2,000 miles east of Seattle, an illegal alien mother of a 12-year-old girl is accused of allowing a man to sexually abuse her daughter. The man is also an illegal alien. The girl was able to escape her tormentors and managed to call the police. In yet another example of Biden's disastrous border policies, an illegal alien linked to a terrorist group released twice by immigration authorities, Mohammed Karwan, affiliated with the Hezb Islami, a designated terrorist organization. And thanks to Biden and his idiotic policies, the illegal was caught and released at the border in 2023, then arrested again, and then let go again with an asylum hearing date. These reports are utterly commonplace now. What was once shocking has become the new standard, the new norm under Biden and his silly regime. No wonder some Americans want to say goodbye to the Marxist Dems in this country who have foisted the democratic governance, so-called, on them, foisted Marxism on them. Take a look at the Greater Idaho Project. 13 counties in Oregon have voted to separate from the rest of the Marxist dim state. I mean, it's so blue, it's red, and to join Idaho. Most recently, Crook County voters backed the proposal to join Idaho by 53%. Idaho Republican Congressman Russ Fulcher. Congressman, thanks for joining us. And let me start with a real visitation. That is those 13 counties in Oregon that want to join up with the state of Idaho in what they call a greater Idaho. What do you think of that idea?
Well, whether I like it or not, there's definitely a desire for that to happen. And, there's just a big difference in how Idaho and Oregon is governed. And I think people recognize that. In Salem and Portland, the idea is to go with a very socialistic model. And that's both culturally and politically. They've gone very soft on crime. They've legalized marijuana. And I think that during the COVID restrictions, they were very, very restrictive. And so contrast that across the border just a few miles away, and Idaho has been quite lenient when it comes to regulatory environment, and the value system personally is just a lot more traditional. It's very family oriented, very strong pro law enforcement, pro Second Amendment, and the pro life community. So that's where a lot of people would rather live, and so no surprise that there is a big move to try to do this.
Right. And the in-migration to the state of Idaho is impressive without those 13 counties. What do you think would be, I'm just curious, have you explored what you would think that would be the impact if indeed Idaho brought in those 13 counties and added it to the state? You think that would be a big positive, a problem? How do you view it?
Well, there was always be infrastructure issues that we would have to work through. And frankly, I don't think it's likely, given the process that has to happen with two legislatures and the U.S. Congress having to do that. But the reality is that we have a lot in common with Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington and Northern California, for that matter. And it would certainly be to their benefit, and it would add to our representation as well. So personally, I'm open to the idea, but if nothing else, perhaps Portland and Salem and Seattle will get a signal that maybe their current path isn't appreciated by a lot of their citizens.
Yeah, I would hope so, but they've been pretty stubborn about it so far. You would think that they were a People's Republic of Oregon and a People's Republic of Washington. The politics are stunning. I want to turn to, speaking of in-migration, we're talking about an invasion at our southern border. We're watching all sorts of issues in terms of the sovereignty of this country. A report just talking about 40 million acres of farmland in this country owned by foreign countries. This is starting to be an issue, a very big issue for the country. Is it an issue in the state of Idaho?
Well, there is some of that, and we have seen this progressing over recent years. And first of all, make no mistake about the situation with the open border. That is a strategy. That is a strategy to change the social and economic fabric of the United States of America. And the idea is you import millions of people, you get them addicted to social programs, you give them the power to vote, and the next thing you know, you've got an entirely different system. So this is a strategy. I think the acquisition of agricultural land, is also part of that strategy. We've been taking steps at the state level and also even at the federal level to try to put some sideboards on that. Got to be careful with how you write statute on who can own what, because we want to keep the ability to own land and property. However, there are some sideboards that we've got to put in place, I believe, to ensure that we don't sell the very lifeblood of our economy, which is our agricultural land. And that certainly has been happening.
It is happening. It's happening across the country. And this has become a national security issue without any question whatsoever. The number of places, particularly property owned near sensitive military installations and bases, particularly air bases, missile bases. And in each instance, and I know of no exception to this, in each instance, the owner of that farmland or plots near those bases has turned out to be related to communist China. Your thoughts?
Homeland security concerns, natural resource concerns. This is one of those things where I do believe it's a proper role of government to insert itself and ensure that our ownership is uniquely American and dedicated to American values and the American rule of law. And to your point, we have seen some of those trends shifting in the other direction. And, you know, some of our enemies, they're not able to confront us toe to toe militarily. They're not able to confront us in traditional warfare. However, they can leverage our own freedoms, if you will, including land ownership, including access through various systems, to leverage that against us in a way. And so this is potentially what's happening. And so the initial steps have been to try to insulate sensitive areas, but it's unfortunately probably going to have to go further than that in order to solve the problem.
And in terms of national security, most of the country right now, according to the latest national polls, want President Trump back in that White House, and they want him in there immediately. They're also clamoring for some reasonable economic policies to get us through what has been a period of some considerable strain in the economy, to say the least, and for many of our citizens, a real burden. We're talking about as many as 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck right now to get by. Your thoughts about President Trump and his capacity to bring back Trump economic and foreign policy positions?
So much of an economy depends on confidence. So much of that depends on leadership. And President Trump has proven that he has got the ability to instill confidence in investors, to instill confidence in manufacturers, to instill the ability for Americans to compete and communicate that. And so he is desperately needed back in office. I think it's horrendous what has happened to him and the double standard of justice and how he's been attacked. But the reality is, I believe that's backfiring. And I think he is going to be back in office. And also, to your point as well, the impact on foreign policy. Our allies around the world are not confident in America right now. And we have sent signals that we are weak. We've sent signals that we're indecisive. And there's another area where the president has, President Trump, that is, has proven that he is very confident and very capable. And so he's needed in Washington, D.C.
Congressman, great to have you with us. We thank you so much. Congressman Russ Fulcher, thanks for being with us. Turning now to a great deal, and you know that means MyPillow, and it means Mike Lindell. After he invented the world's best pillow, Mike created the famous Giza Dream Sheets. They are the best sheets you will ever sleep on. My wife and I have slept on them for years, and we mean it when we say you'll get your best night's sleep on Giza Dream Sheets. Your best night's sleep, by the way, just got even better. For a limited time, you will receive a queen size set for $59.98, king size just $10 more. Those are the lowest prices in history. Mike and MyPillow employees continue to be canceled by those big box stores and attacked by the left-wing national media. They appreciate all of your great support during these tough times and want to thank you by giving you free shipping on your entire order today. To get the best specials ever, go to mypillow.com or call 800-977-9152 and use promo code Dobbs. You get the famous Giza Dream Sheets, queen size $59.98, king size $10 more. So call 800-977-9152 or go to mypillow.com, promo code Dobbs. That's DOBBS. And join us for my podcast, The Great America Show. Thanks for being with us this evening. Join us here tomorrow, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, Dr. Mark Richards joins us to talk about, well, what else? Bird flu and the totalitarian Biden regime, and the Greater Idaho Movement's executive director, Matt McCaw. They've had a bellyful of the left on the West Coast. Coming up right after this is the Lindell Report. Mike has a great show for you. Stay with us. Thanks for joining us. Good night. God bless you, and God bless America.